riding. I'd like to start by acknowledging that the place we are on is a traditional territory of the Comox First Nations, who have been caregivers of this land since time immemorial. And also to congratulate Comox First Nations on the recent ratification of their treaty. One of the functions of the Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce, besides education and relationship building, is advocacy. At events like this and direct engagement with your elected officials through our members-only political roundtable events throughout the year, through a nonpartisan lens. I'd like to thank our board of directors for their guidance and their governance of the Chamber. I'd like to thank our Chamber staff for organizing this event. I'd like to thank the candidates for joining us for a thoughtful discussion. And I'd also like to thank our attendees tonight for your thoughtful and considerate discussion and for your decorum. And I'll pass it along to our host for the evening, Mike Atkins.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It seems that we have the meat bingo downstairs to compete with today, so we're off to a great start. For those who don't know me, my name is Mike Atkins. I am the CEO of the Comox Valley Airport, former 19-wing wing commander, and also a director on the Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce. And it is my pleasure to be the moderator for tonight's All Candidates Forum. My apologies to those of you that were coming looking for a debate tonight. This is not a debate, this is a forum. I will be the one asking the questions. However, we will be using Slido so that you can attempt to influence me with a question that you may like asked. A few administrative details before we get going this evening. We have a large crowd here, and that's great. It will probably get a little bit warm. Emergency exits, should you need them, are at both ends of the room and up here at the front. Smoking, vaping is not surprisingly not allowed within the building and hasn't been for many years. There is a smoking pit through the doors out here down in the parking lot should you need to do so. Throughout the evening, we will have a Slido poll going to seek audience input on what questions you would like the candidates to respond to. You can access the Slido poll by going to hashtag #CVCCVote or using the QR code on the screen. This will be up again later before we get to questions. The questions will be posed to all candidates on completion of the responses to the pre-provided questions. Please note that we will only be asking questions that have a business focus. We are a business organization. And while you have your cell phones out, logging into Slido, please ensure they are on silent for the rest of the evening. Tonight's All Candidates Forum is hosted by the Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce as a nonpartisan event to hear directly from the candidates about their position and their party's platforms on a variety of issues, with a focus on business. In the spirit of fairness, I would ask that you keep applause, that applause be kept to a minimum so that we can maximize the time we hear from our guests. I would also ask that, as a sign of respect to all, there be no outbursts or heckling. This is not a political rally, nor is it the time to express your perspective on the material presented. We live in a democracy where everyone has the right to express their views. You do not have to agree with the ideas expressed, but you should be thankful that they have the right to express them. After an extensive military career and serving abroad, I know all too well what it's like to live in a country that doesn't enjoy those same freedoms. You may have questions about what you've read online or questions pertaining to strategic voting, etc. While the candidates are free to refer to anything they wish during their opening and closing remarks, The Chamber will not be asking these types of questions and will only select questions related to business and economic development. So please ensure your questions are appropriately worded in that vein. And while this isn't designed as a civics class, a reminder of some of the items that are within federal jurisdiction. That is not to say our elected members of Parliament cannot advocate with our municipal and provincial counterparts, but their area of greatest control is shown on the screen. Tonight's format will see each candidate introduce themselves by way of a 2-minute opening statement. Following that, we will proceed with the candidates' responses to pre-provided questions that we know are top of mind for most businesses. We will then have the opportunity to pose the top-ranked questions by way of Slido, which will be moderated to keep the questions within the bounds of business. You're noticing a trend here, I hope. Finally, each candidate will have the opportunity to make a final statement. You'll notice that there are 2 seats currently empty. We know that Tanil is running late and she will join us at some point this evening. We'll wait to see what happens with Mr. Gunn. Before we begin, please join me in thanking all the candidates, not only for their participation this evening, but for choosing to put themselves forward for public service. These are challenging times for all politicians, and yet our cherished democracy requires that dedicated individuals step forward to serve. A round of applause for all the candidates present. All right, let's get the evening started. Apologies for the slide. Glenn is a late addition, and we're very happy to have him with us tonight. He's the independent candidate on the slate. I'd like to welcome Jennifer to start proceedings with your opening comments. 2 minutes, please. I would also ask the candidates, just because of the unfamiliarity of some people in the audience, every time before you speak, please introduce yourself throughout the evening. That'll just keep everybody on the same page. That'd be great. To you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, that is working. Thank you all for coming. This is a great turnout. So Jennifer Lash, Liberal candidate. I've lived in this riding for 27 years in the community of Sointula up on the North Island, the real North Island. I was a single mom, raised my 2 kids with all the benefits of a small community, on the soccer pitch, skiing at Mount Cain. They both have worked in the commercial fishing industry in the summer, which has been great. And because of all the things I benefit from my community, I'm passionate about building healthy communities, which of course requires a healthy economy. And for me, this means supporting traditional industries such as logging and commercial fishing, really trying to foster the new industries and the small businesses that really are the entrepreneurial spirit of our communities, repairing the relationship with Indigenous communities, and also helping households and local governments have the support they need to navigate some of the challenging issues such as the opioid crisis and climate change. To do this, I will make sure that federal policies, because as was pointed out, we have certain jurisdictions, so I will make sure that federal policies are designed to meet the needs of the communities in this riding, be it a more urban riding such as Comox, right up to the really rural communities such as Sointula and Port Hardy. And I'm going to be able to do this for 2 reasons. First of all, I'm the most qualified candidate on the ballot. I've worked for 30 years at the intersection of reconciliation, economy, conservation, and climate change. I totally understand the desire to move quickly to protect, but the need to move slowly to heal. And I've spent 30 years working on this, on federal policy. That is my area of expertise, with the past 2 years spent as a senior policy advisor. And then finally, Mark Carney and the Liberal Party are poised to win the next election, which means that if I was elected as the Member of Parliament, I would have a seat at the table as we craft a new direction for Canada. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Glenn Staples. I'm an independent. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I think the thing I'd like to say right now is that some of the things I'm going to say are going to be very critical of the other party lines. But I want to point out that I've been involved in politics for probably 55 years. And I've known a lot of candidates, a lot of people involved in politics. Almost all of them are good people. They're dedicated. They've got different opinions. But what's happened right now is it's become so polarized that it's more mudslinging than it is talk. And anybody here remember Diefenbaker and Pearson, that era? Yeah. Well, I seem to remember people actually debating politely and talking about the long-term good of the country, not just trying to win, but actually looking for policies that were good. And I think it reminds me, I think it was David Hume that said, truth springs from argument between friends. That means we have to be friends. And if you could imagine Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre being friends, I think it would be good for the country. They might be able to learn something from each other. But I want to make sure that you understand. Oh, and by the way, I'm kind of the left or the right. I'm kind of in between. I think the left is right about some things and wrong about some things, and the right is right about some things and wrong about some things. And I look at things in the long term. There's a lot of our policies are just geared for the short term, which is what the original conservatives were concerned about with an elected system. They wanted to look at the long term. So I might have to be the right winger here, I guess.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks to the Chamber for putting this on. It's great that Comox has this opportunity to meet and talk. And I'm getting a signal to stand up, but I'm wearing my sitting down shoes right now. So we're going to sit down for right now. I would like to introduce myself. I live in Comox. My name is Jessica Wegg. I am a lawyer by trade. I have my law degree from Indiana University. I'm licensed to practice in the United States and in Canada. And my legal practice in the United States has actually been basically suing the US government for overreach and police brutality and other government abuses, using the US Constitution to do that. So I think if there is a person who can respond to the constitutional crisis in the States that is affecting us here, I am very well qualified. I'm the best qualified to do that on this panel. I also have my master's degree in clinical psychology, and my legal practice on this side of the border is criminal defense with BC Legal Aid. So that's my professional and educational background. My kids go to school here in Comox. I've got an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they are the light of my life and the reason that I do this. So I'm running with the Green Party of Canada because I am looking for hope in the future for our children and for future generations to have a healthy, safe, secure place to live, homes they can afford, and I want to know that they are going to be okay and that they will have a world when they grow up, which it sounds kind of doom and gloom, but it's that serious. So I'm glad that we're here to talk about business opportunities, but we can't forget to look at the business issues through a climate lens to understand how everything is interconnected and how we don't have an economy without taking care of our environment.
Well, thank you for those opening remarks. And if the other candidates, when they arrive, if they arrive, then I'll provide them with an opportunity as well, and then they can just join in with the remainder of the event. We're going to go to question 1 of the prepared list of questions. And Glenn, I know you didn't get it, and I'm going to ask Glenn to actually start this time. Thanks. So the question is, and it's on behind you, but I'll read it out for the audience. Question 1 is on Canada's global trade relationships. Small and medium-sized businesses are a vital part of our local economy. In light of the recent moves by the US government disruptions in global trade agreements, and ongoing geopolitical tensions, how do you plan to enable local businesses to compete and succeed internationally while benefiting our local communities? Starting with an easy one.
Yeah, well, it's phrased like as if I'm going to be the government, and I doubt that. I doubt if I'll even get elected, actually. But the thing is, you know, I remember back in the free trade debate back in the 80s, and I was not in favor of free trade at the time. Later on, I kind of realized, well, the one good thing about free trade is that it reduces the chance of war. Countries that trade together are less likely to go to war, so that's a positive. But now that our economy is so intertwined with the United States, I think we should have another look at it. And, you know, if we can become self-reliant within Canada, I think that would be advisable. The more we can do from within our own country, the better off we are. And also to pursue international trade with more reliable trade partners, because obviously the US is not reliable anymore. And so we should be, even China is more reliable than the US at this point. That's probably about all I have to say on that issue.
Just a reminder to introduce yourself again.
Jessica Wegg, Green Party. I wore a sweater to make it easy. So the Green Party has actually been advocating to help small businesses for over a decade. Elizabeth May had a private member's bill that was called Think Small First, that recognizes that small and medium-sized businesses employ over 60% of Canadians. So it's really important that we support small and medium-sized businesses and help them make sure that we can invest in our communities and make sure that these businesses can operate with the best resources that they have. So one of the parts of that bill, which would propose again, would be to review, to establish mandatory review of the potential impact of any government bill or regulation that would, what impact it would have on small businesses. So to always look at how will this legislation impact small businesses every single time. With regard to how the United States situation will affect things, we have to diversify where we are, who our trading partners are. Like Glenn said earlier, it's just not negotiable, and we need to make sure that we're supporting Canadian businesses every chance we get. And I know that everyone is doing that in this room. We're all shopping Canadian, we're all buying as much Canadian as we can, and we need to remember to shop local too, and to continue to do that with our local business people here in Comox, because we need to just lift each other up and lift our communities up.
Thanks. Jennifer Lash, Liberal Party. I wore red to make it easier. So when Donald Trump started the trade war, a lot of the headlines have focused on large industries and not on small businesses, right? So it's been about oil, it's been about the auto sector, and it hasn't been about small businesses. And it's so easy for small businesses to get ignored when all the attention is going on the big businesses. But I think there are some things that we're looking to put in place that are really beneficial for small businesses. So first of all, if I was elected, I would be advocating for them, because I also know how much our small communities rely on small businesses as the entrepreneurial spirit. So definitely would be advocating. There's three things that we can do that I can just note off the top. So one is reducing the internal trade barriers. And what this does is it opens up markets beyond just British Columbia. And this includes things like harmonizing provincial standards. Right now, you can't take certain products across, it's more than just alcohol, the trade barriers. It has to do with standardization. And then the other is investing in the infrastructure that we need. So the roads, the trains, the ports that we need so that we can move our products better. And all of that would hopefully make it easier for small businesses to get their products to a larger market within Canada. And then we need to diversify beyond the United States for our export market. So that's emerging markets in Asia, Africa, Latin America, but also there are countries where we have free trade agreements already, like with Europe, but we need to provide some support to small businesses to help them navigate those complex. I don't know if you've ever read a free trade agreement. It's not easy reading, right? So how can we support small businesses to see what are the opportunities with the existing free trade agreements that we already have? And then, of course, promote Made in Canada branding. Canada has really stepped up globally and is really making a difference. So let's brag about it. And then finally, we would increase the use of domestic products in Canada, such as using local lumber in the houses that are being built through the housing plan. Thank you.
All right, for our next question of the evening. Many businesses are impacted by theft, vandalism, and other crimes. Prolific offenders who repeatedly cycle in and out of the criminal justice system threaten local businesses, particularly those in the retail and hospitality sectors. What legislative or policy changes would you pursue to reduce crime and improve safety for business owners, their employees, and their customers?
Jessica Way, Green Party. So I think that this is a great question, and I think that we need to ask ourselves, what is causing the crime in our communities? I think we can look at two major factors. One is desperation, and one is boredom. People are addicted to substances. They don't have money for basic needs, and they're desperate. And so we can tackle that underlying issue by providing more mental health care, making it more available to folks in our community who really need it most. The Green Party would include mental health care as part of our amazing Canadian universal healthcare system, because it's part of us, it's part of who we are. We need to address it. It needs to be there and available. It means available means available. It's in our prisons, it's in our communities, it's in our schools. People who need mental health care have people they can access and obtain the care from. The other thing that I mentioned was boredom. I think a lot of our youth are looking for something to do. They're looking for something entertaining, and sometimes, unfortunately, and I've seen it, we've all seen it with our signs around the riding, it's vandalism. So we need to make sure that our youth have opportunities, they have things to look forward to, they have things that they can do outside of just running around with their friends, causing havoc on the streets. So the Green Party, we would advocate for free secondary education for folks, and it wouldn't only be university, it'd be college, trade schools, so that we can access those opportunities for our young people. And we also have the Youth Climate Corps, which is great paying jobs for youth out of high school to address climate situations around the country. So a lot of ways to address these underlying issues of crime.
I'm going to go to my short name now, Jen Lash, just to make it a little bit easier, save on time. So it's very obvious that the current system isn't working. There are people suffering from mental health and addiction issues that need compassion and support. But everyone also deserves to feel safe. Safe in their homes, safe in the streets, and businesses should be able to thrive. So we need to tackle both of those issues, and I'm very committed to that. Recently, the Liberal government did work with Premier Eby to amend the criminal code and strengthen the bail system and ensure repeat offenders weren't released. And this week, Mark Carney announced that he would further toughen the criminal code, particularly for to make bail laws stricter for things such as home invasion and car stealing. So really trying to make it so if you are doing the crime, it is harder to get out, particularly if you're a repeat offender. And I think we've seen that that's required. He also agreed to train 1,000 new border agents. So let's try and reduce the amount of drugs coming into it's not about the drugs going to the United States, it's about the drugs coming into Canada, and also reduce the amount of illegal guns coming into the Canada, and also reduce the amount of stolen cars being taken out. So really trying to tackle crime at the border. But it's more than just cracking down on the crime and the enforcement issue. That's only part of the solution. We also need to care for people who are going through these issues. Anyone in this room who is a friend or family member who's suffering, it is painful and is not a quick solution. Anyone tells you there's a quick solution to dealing with addiction issues doesn't understand the complexities of the problem. So we need a full suite of programs that range from limited safe supply to treatment centers to housing, a full suite, so that we are caring for people and preventing the death and then helping them get better and better and better and walking them through society. And if I was elected, I would be figuring out how the federal government can help work with the provincial government, because it would be collaborative, to make sure we could land the right full suite of packages to make sure people are safe. Thank you.
Glenn Staples, The Independent. Well, this one, I'm glad you got this question on here, because this is where I might be a little bit distinguished from my colleagues here. I really admire Singapore's justice system. Singapore has a policy where if they see behavior that they don't like, they make a law against it, which includes a penalty. If the penalty isn't working, they do two things. They increase the enforcement, in other words, the likelihood of getting caught, or they increase the punishment. Surprisingly, it works. The thing is here, we seem to be caught in a system where there's a sort of love conquers all philosophy, where drug addiction, we give first free needles, and safe injection site, all of these things which are actually more facilitating than they are deterring. And it ain't working. There are more people dying now than there were when this program started. And in terms of the drug addiction, in Singapore, for example, drug dealers get a bullet through the head. Drug addicts get compulsory detox. And the thing is that this is just not working. And by the way, the drug addicts that I know mostly are good people underneath the addiction. If you can get rid of the addiction, you got a good person underneath it. The dealers, not so much. They're just in it for the money. They don't care how many people they kill. And they're killing a lot of people. Why aren't they charged with murder? So I'm for law and order and some enforcement, and let's get over the love conquers all strategy.
Yeah,
I'm the first one.
you're the first one up for this next question.
A little bit confusing there. We're good. We
Yeah.
figured it out.
Okay,
Collaboration.
question 3, creating a business-friendly environment. Our local businesses are challenged with complicated regulations, high employment taxes, and an archaic tax system that hinder growth and job creation. What specific measures would you take to reduce red tape and encourage investment in small and medium enterprises?
So red tape is always a hard one. Of course, I can only, again, speak to what the federal government could do. And one of the ones that I really, when I was researching this, that I really decided to focus on was sort of the taxation system. A bit of a policy nerd. I could have gone into a lot of this in depth, but didn't have the time to, and wouldn't be able to answer all in 2 minutes. So I think there's a few things that we can do to reduce the cost through the taxation system. And one would be leveling the playing field. So right now there are digital platforms and short-term rental operators like Airbnb that are getting out of the tax system. They're not having to pay as much taxes as people in the hospitality business, and this does not seem fair at all. And so we need to find a system so so we level that playing field so there isn't a financial advantage given to some people in that sector. Secondly, we need to help small businesses navigate the tax system. There's a lot of costs and time. One of the most important, valuable things a small business has is the time that the owners have to run their business. And if a lot of that is spent dealing with the tax system, then you're losing that's time taken away from the business. So how can we work with the CRA to streamline the system for paying taxes, for processing your information, and for filing your taxes. Let's just make it easier for people. It does not have to be as complicated as it currently is. I was a small business owner. It was a small consulting firm. It was a much easier system of tax paying, but it was still a burden and it took a lot of my time. So we need to introduce a standardized, simplified tax return, and we need to have clear, plain language so it's easy to understand. So this is not a burden for you, particularly for people starting new businesses, right? Anyone in here who's started a business, you know that you have to learn a lot to do that. And the easier it is for the tax system to function, the easier it is for people to start up those new businesses and get things going. Thank you.
Yeah, you'll have to forgive me here. I didn't see these questions until just now. But I was a small business owner myself. When I was younger, I ran a construction business. In construction, we would bid on contracts to build buildings. Okay, if you bid too high, you don't get the contract. If you bid too low, you don't make any money. You got to bid just right and then work your butt off. And the ones that we were doing were steel buildings composed of putting bolts in. If you could save 1/10 of a second on each bolt, that could translate into thousands by the time you finish the job. So efficiency. Now you're talking about over-regulation here. That certainly hit the construction industry. I've seen it. The stuff that we used to do, walking up ladders backwards, things like that. The safety regulations are overboard now. And my brother built a house in Royston. He had to hire a biologist to assert that there was no heron nest on his property. He had to hire an engineer to make sure that the height of his garage was not over the limit. Couldn't use a tape measure? My goodness. All of those things cost a lot of money. The regulation. Now, I would say in addition that some things need to be better regulated. For example, carbon emissions. I know you may not be happy to hear that, but that's causing a problem. Government's responsibility is to make laws and enforce them. They're the only ones that can reduce the emissions. But on some areas like construction, building codes, they are way over-regulated. Sometimes my son works in development, and he says it takes like 3 years to get a new building approved now where he is. And, the housing crisis is partly the result of over-regulation.
Jessica White, Green Party. So the last major tax reform that Canada had was in 1967. A lot's happened since then. We need to update our tax code. We need to make it modernized and fair for all of us. We need to make sure that the big corporations are not paying less in taxes than they should be because they are finding loopholes. They need to pay their fair share. Individuals, families, we pay our fair share. Small businesses, we show up and pay our taxes, but the big corporations are not doing that. So we need to make sure that we are taxing fairly for everyone. The Green Party has a transformational tax plan that will bring a lot of help and support to the folks and businesses who need it most. We propose increasing the amount that is not taxed federally of income to $40,000. This will provide immediate relief to low and middle income families, and they will be able to keep more money in their pockets. They will be able to spend more money at our businesses. And it's by supporting those people who are at the bottom of the pyramid of where the corporations and the rich, very ultra wealthy are at the top. We're supporting the workers and the people at the bottom, and they will, if they're supported, they can support our businesses and we can move that money upwards. Trickle down doesn't work. We have to move the money up, and we do that by supporting the people who need it most.
All right, if you'll bear with me in the moment, they say flexibility is the key to air power, and I'm all about air power. I'm going to ask Tanil to answer the question as everybody else just asked, the third one, and then she'll make an opening statement, if you'll bear with us for a second. The floor is yours. Please introduce yourself. Just introduce yourself, 2 minutes afterwards. 2 minutes for the question, and then 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Hi, I'm Tanil.
There you go.
I'm the NDP candidate for North Island Powell River, so thank you for having me. Maybe I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so we're on taxation. Great question, great opportunity to talk about taxation. I'm a big supporter of equitable taxation and making sure our ultra-rich are paying their fair share, which we don't have in Canada right now. So currently our tax system is not working. Our big oil and gas companies get billions in subsidies, and small businesses are kind of left trailing behind. We need to cut taxes for workers and families. We need to do this by raising the basic amount of the $19,500, putting $505 back in the pockets of those earnings between $19,500 and the $177.82. So that's a lot of numbers to throw at you. I apologize for that. We want to permanently remove the GST from your essentials, not only grocery essentials, but from your cell phone bill, from your home heating bill, these things that we see the figures coming through all the time and having to pay our hundreds and hundreds of dollars to heat our homes and to just keep our cell phones alive and well. We estimate that this is going to save families $448 per year, which is a lot of money when we look at the cost of groceries right now. So more money in the pockets of local consumers is good for small businesses in the Comox Valley and just good for families in general. So I really, really, really want to echo that we need to see equitable taxation in our country. It's not fair that we see millions and millions of dollars in grants going to corporations that are then bringing in billions years following. It doesn't make sense that a company that is reporting over $2 billion worth of profits is receiving a $13 million grant. That doesn't make sense. We need to fix that, and we can. It just takes the political will to do it. So thank you so much for the question.
And now I would invite you to make a 2-minute opening remark. And thanks for joining us. You missed all the preamble, but I won't put the whole audience through that again.
I'll try to keep it short. I wanted to say bonsoir. Je m'appelle Tanil. My name is Tanil, and as I mentioned, I'm your NDP candidate for North Island Powell River. I'm obviously late. I had a meeting booked with some of your fabulous healthcare providers that overlapped with this meeting, and I just couldn't sacrifice that time with them to hear them out. So thank you for allowing me to still show up and answer some questions for you and be present. So I'm here tonight to assure you that you'll remain in great hands in Ottawa with me. With a background in not only politics, but social work and healthcare, I'm uniquely positioned to go to bat in diverse challenges and work across difference to bring awesome solutions for Canada and for North Island Powell River. I want to move forward to build better healthcare systems, not only affordable housing, but accessible housing, and to establish a taxation system that sees the ultra-rich pay their fair share. So thank you for allowing me this moment to reintroduce myself and catch up with my kind of comrades here. And I look forward to the discussion that we're going to continue to have this evening. So thank you very much.
Oh, I've lost track.
What does the yellow thing mean? Okay. Thank you.
Glenn, I'm going to ask you to start off on this next question, question 4. And I will read it out. Question 4 is on promoting economic activity through banking. High interest rates can reduce consumer spending and business investment. What policies would you support to spur investment, provide business access to credit at reasonable rates, and improve affordability to fuel economic growth?
Well, first, I just wanted to comment on the previous one because I heard about raising the basic minimum exemption, and I think that's a great idea. And the getting the rich to pay more taxes is also, I'm a big fan of that. 1944, the maximum tax rate was 94%. This idea of trickle-down economics has got it down to, what is it, 33% now, something like that, 37, it's in the 30s. And it ain't working. The idea of trickle-down economics is not working. Now, in terms of the interest rates, well, we've gone through those really high rates. I've seen in the 80s when the interest rates went up over 20%. And what happened was that it was rising through the what do you call it? The inflation rate was rising through the previous decade, but the interest rates were lagging behind the rise in the consumer price index. And they didn't get it under control until they jumped the interest rates ahead of the inflation rate, which is what they learned, and they did that this time. They jumped ahead of the inflation rate, and that actually worked to bring the inflation down. But those are tied together. You can't, and I think we've got a former Bank of Canada guy running in one of these parties. He would probably be pretty good up to date on what to do with those interest rates. This is for small business we're talking about. Yeah, that's about all I can say.
So a couple things here. One, the banks have entirely too much power. There are only a few of them in Canada, and they have a monopoly, and the banking industry is one thing that the federal government absolutely can regulate, and we need to be doing more. We've got TD Bank recently paid billions of dollars in penalties for money laundering, and they're still just operating a bank, and we get to enjoy our fees paying their fines. So we need to get those banks under control. Secondly, this is where I'm really going to show my green colors that you would probably expect. We cannot worry so much about interest rates without also talking about the climate. An article in The Guardian last week, I'll read you the headline, "Climate Crisis on Track to Destroy Capitalism," warns top insurer. So it's not hippie tree hugging people who are saying, watch out, climate change is real, it's happening. It's the top insurance companies in the world are saying this is not sustainable and it is going to cost lots of money. Insurance in California is not being sold right now to homes because wildfires are out of control. You can't buy homes in Florida because floods are out of control. It's going to happen here. Right now, with our current policies, our climate policies in place, we're looking at a rise of between 2.2 and 3.4 degrees Celsius above industrial levels. I'll read this sentence. "The damage at 3 degrees Celsius will be so great that governments will be unable to provide financial bailouts, and it will be impossible to adapt to many climate impacts." So these are the chairs and board members of the top insurance companies in the world who are warning we have to get this under control. And the Green Party has always stood for strong climate policies and to stand up for stopping the fossil fuel industry and to addressing this crisis and emergency like the crisis and emergency that it is. Thank you.
It's me now? Okay. Great. Okay, perfect. Oh, yes, awesome question. And thank you for bringing up insurance rates. I think it's not commonly known that already in a lot of our rural and remote communities, it's almost impossible to get insurance. And the climate crisis and the fires and the droughts is only making that worse. And as North Island Powell River, we have a ton of rural and remote communities in our area that they're beautiful, and they arguably have some amazing support programs in those rural and remote communities because people like to retire there. But how scary is it to retire to a place or move to a place or live in a place where you can't actually get insurance because you don't have access to the emergency services that are necessary for insurance companies to feel comfortable to give you that insurance. So it is a very, very real thing in our riding to be concerned about. So Bank of Canada is considered one of the best run central banks in the world. It has a phenomenal reputation. One thing that is definitely threatening that is arguably my competitor over here has threatened to fire the governor if elected to office, which will absolutely devastate our economy. And that's not the type of action that, I mean, in my opinion, we would look for from our prime minister. We would look for someone that's going to lead us well, lead us strong, and support everyone in our country and not look to harm it or disable it in any way. We're not a dictatorship in Canada. We work together cohesively, collaboratively, and we do good work together for all of us across the country. So thank you, and that's me on insurance.
So I echo the other comments around the Bank of Canada. We're very blessed with how the Bank of Canada works. I know it's painful when insurance or interest rates go up, but it's done in order to keep inflation rates down. And inflation is so painful, particularly on low-income families. And so it is an unfortunate thing that we have to do, but we have such experts at the Bank of Canada that we were able to bring our inflation rate into line, our interest rates in line. We were one of the fastest countries in the G20 to do that, which is pretty remarkable. And now we have the former leader of the Bank of Canada running to be the Prime Minister of the country. So great confidence in him to be able to navigate some of these economic hurdles, but particularly the ones that are coming with the economic uncertainty from the South. But in terms of sort of more specific things to help small businesses, like in a community of Comox, I think we can start to look at what are some of the tax incentives that can be developed so there's greater investment in small and medium businesses. How can we start to generate some of that income being brought into the community? I think I mentioned a lot of policies earlier about increasing trade, diversifying market, which would be really helpful. And I'm always amazed by the iced tea program, which does some great investment. It's provincial money, but it's a structure that's been set up that depends on local knowledge to figure out what businesses should get the investment. And so is there a way for federal investment to go in through existing programs so we don't have to create a whole other bureaucracy, make more work for everybody, and streamline that kind of funding? That is something that I would really fight for because I know the time it takes for businesses to apply for funding. It uses so many resources. So how can we make that easier? I also want to touch on climate adaptation. And I think this is really important. And it was raised already, the issue of flood insurance. So we have a flood insurance program that's being developed that helps subsidize the premiums so that people can handle it while they make their homes more resilient. And then we're looking at doing that as fire as well. So we would be strong advocates of municipal adaptation plans so you guys understand what needs to be done to build a community that's resilient for the climate that's coming. Thank you.
All right, we have one more prepared question this evening, and then we'll move on to the Slido poll. So during this question, the QR code will be up there so you can get into Slido. If you haven't, I've just taken a look now. There are some questions in there. Some I won't be asking right off the bat because they basically told you I wouldn't ask that type of question. And try to broaden your questions out to be applicable for all the candidates. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Jessica, I'll ask you to start us off with the final question, final prepared question of the evening. And it's on political collaboration and action. We have all seen politics become more divisive and combative, both nationally and internationally. Regardless of who forms government, how will you overcome partisanship and work together in the best interest of the business community in our riding?
Thank you, Jessica White, Green Party. This is a great question for Greens because we are all about collaboration. We are always reaching across party lines and working with the other parties who will best, who have ideas and legislation that they want to pass that we think would support our communities and would be supported by our communities. A great example of this has just been earlier on when we knew the writ was about to drop. Our leaders, Elizabeth May and Jonathan Pedno, had a press conference and they said, we are calling on the other parties to remember that while we're going into this election, and it's going to be divisive, and we know there are a lot of big issues that we're all working on. We need to remember that we're still a united front for Canada, and we need to stand up together for Canada and make sure that we are not allowing ourselves to be weakened by our division and our politics when it comes to how we confront the issues that we're facing on the global stage. Another great thing about Greens is that we're not whipped, so that we work for our constituents. We do not work for our party leaders. If there is legislation that is proposed that would not work for the North Island Powell River, but it would work in Saanich Gulf Islands, it would work for Mike Morrison, Ontario, but it wouldn't work for us, I wouldn't be required to go along with the party. I listen to you, I work with you, you are my bosses. So we are happy to work across party lines if it's what our communities need and if we can show up for our communities by doing so. We think collaboration is the only way forward. If we're going to get out of this mess, we have to figure out how to work together, because we have seen what happens when everybody just digs their heels in and they refuse to cooperate. They will not budge on issues. It means work doesn't get done for Canadians, which is not helpful for Canadians. So we are all about working together.
I think this is definitely an area that the NDP has championed for many, 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 many years. We've been sitting in official opposition for a long time, and doing that work has resulted in our pharmacare plan, our $10 a day childcare plan, our dental plan, the National Children's Food Program for in schools. Really, really, really great stuff that without working across difference, we would have never seen come forward in our country. So I think the NDP is greatly positioned to do this work. I also want to just give a little bit of thanks to the Green Party when we were seeing some pretty horrific statements come to light through the media repeatedly over and over and over again, that the Green Party stood up and made a statement against racism, about being dismissive. And I really appreciated that. Silence is often compliance, and when you're faced with harmful and divisive beliefs, especially in a place of someone that is looking to represent federally, it can be extremely harmful and devastating. And so I just want to offer that I appreciated that. The NDP and I mean, Rachel has been a strong advocate for our military, so much so that she won the Women in Defense Award last year, which was so cool to see her receive that award. And she's advocated strongly for our veterans, sick leave for federally regulated workers, which is awesome. I can't say enough about how good we are at working across that difference, at working with folks that maybe have very challenging views that we don't align with. And I want to offer that's the work that I've been doing arguably almost my entire life, especially my career as a social worker. You're rarely met with someone that completely agrees with your decisions and your views as a social worker. Your job is to enter challenging conversations and come to a place of agreement through that conversation and move forward collectively together in a better way. So I would love to be able to do that work for us in North Island Powell River and for you in the Comox Valley.
So I believe very strongly that really great things happen when you have positive working relationships, and that requires investing in those relationships. This has been an operating principle of me for my entire career. When I was working in the environmental movement and we wanted to do a lot of work to change the way the bottom trawling industry was happening and some of the negative impacts were happening, we sat down with the bottom trawling industry. When I was working in the aquaculture industry and we were concerned of the impacts of open net cage salmon farms, I sat down with the aquaculture industry. I'm not afraid to sit down with people who disagree with me. In fact, I find it to be a very rewarding experience to sit down, build a relationship, realize that we're all people, and try and find a path forward that meets our respective goals. It's hard, but it's the most rewarding way to do things. I found the same thing when I went to government. Working in government is all about relationships. Nobody gets to walk into any room if you're a minister or anyone and just tell people what to do. You have to have relationships with the bureaucrats. You have to have relationships with the people in caucus. It is about collaborating and working together. That is how I do things. I've done it for my entire career. And I would be so honored to be able to do this for North Island, Powell River. And it also means working across party lines. So right now we have an NDP provincial government. We have a conservative, well, there's different ridings here, but conservative MLAs. And then we have the municipalities that all have their unique culture as well. We need to work together. We need to be able to collaborate and figure out the solutions that work to all of us. And that requires conversations and dialogue. And you do that when you sit down together and talk and build that relationship. So I know that for myself, I've done some of that during the campaign. I've met with a lot of people during the campaign. But if I was elected, what would be a key priority is meeting with every mayor and council, meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, meeting with the MLA from this area, introducing myself, getting to know each other, and then we can really start to find solutions. Good ideas come from all the way across the political spectrum. I am not going to tell you that only Liberals come up with good ideas. They come from across the spectrum. So we need to be open to them and listening for them and accept good ideas when they come and then champion them and make them happen, because it's not about just a party winning. It's about all of you reaping the benefits of really good progressive ideas. Thank you.
I didn't know this question was going to come up, but this is what I talked about in my opening remarks, is getting over that polarization, working with the other side, making friends with the, you know, I started an environmental group in 1984, so no, it was before that, opposing burning fossil fuels to make electricity up in Hat Creek. 20 years later, I was working on a pipeline, construction. I didn't see any problem with that. I'm getting paid to build this pipeline. I put the money into an electric car or into environmental groups. But the point is that when I watched the forestry issue when it first came up in BC, out in Mears Island, we got Mears Island, then Clackwood Sound, the protest kept going on. The next summer, I picked up some hitchhikers going to Tofino. They wouldn't use toothpicks because it was the flesh of a dead tree. I can tell you, it's true. I can tell you that before that whole issue came up, a lot of the loggers were on our side. But when they got to the point where all the environmentalists hated all the loggers, remember, drove down to Victoria with their trucks and parked on the lawn of the legislature. And to this day, it's hard to find anybody in the forest industry that does not hate all environmentalists. And it's because of that polarization. Be a logger, but work for the forest, work for the environment. Nothing wrong with that. Talk to the people that have different opinions from you. That's where you can learn something, possibly, or maybe they can learn something. But if you stand back and hate the other side, no good will come out of it. And so we have to, I like that question. Thank you for that. Okay.
We're figuring it out together.
All right. You did answer that question, yes. See, now I'm getting confused. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the first part. Is it warm enough in here for you? Because it's certainly warm standing up here, and I can only imagine what it is sitting at this table. With that, we come to the audience participation portion of the evening, where questions posed and the order in which they're posed are voted on by you. Again, it's good to be the king, and I get to choose. And with that in mind, I'd like to... I lost my Slido. With that in mind, I'd like to invite Tennille to start us off with this question. How would candidates, so how would you support businesses to reduce emissions and align with federal policies?
I think we need to look at the kind of the rules of engagement for reducing emissions and figure out how we can do just that. I don't think that it's okay for federal government or even provincial government to make rules and enforce them on small businesses and expect small businesses to just be able to react and change and diversify at the drop of a hat. I think I would like to hope that we all want to reduce emissions, that we all want a better planet, a better climate, and we want to protect our natural environment. But we can't pass the buck onto small businesses and just say, we've made this rule and we expect you to bend and flex and figure it out. We need to enable support mechanisms that help look uniquely at each small business and how they can diversify that for themselves. There's some really amazing programs on the island that will do just that. They'll come and they'll work with you. They'll look at your approach to whatever it is that you're doing. So right down to whether or not you're laying concrete. And they'll look at every step that it takes for you to put down that road. And they'll pull out pieces of like, if we could do this, then this is going to lower your emission rate by this. If we can do this, this is actually going to allow you to recycle this material and use it over here and partner with this business. And they're gonna vastly benefit from that relationship of you guys working together. It's a really amazing program. I hesitate to use the word donut because donut economics often strikes people the wrong way, but it's looking at leveraging those opportunities through businesses to not only lower their own impact on the climate, but also benefit other small businesses through making those collaborations. So I'd love to see, I think it's called Project Zero. The name's escaping me a little bit right now, but it's a really amazing organization. And I think 3 different businesses have gone through it in Campbell River. And one of the major concrete road builders in Duncan actually went through this process, which was really, really cool to see an industry like that builds roads and uses concrete go through this process and really reduce their impact on the environment. It was really, really awesome. So it's those types of programs that we need to partner with small businesses to make sure that there's someone supporting them to do that work and not just change the rules and expect them to bend and flex and make it happen for us.
So I'd like to start by just saying that Canada's emissions right now are the lowest they've been in 27 years, which is amazing. And I'd like to just express my gratitude to every household and every small business that's done anything to try and reduce emissions. That has been part of the solution. There's a lot more to do, but that is pretty amazing that the emissions are the lowest they've been in 27 years. There is a lot that can be done that the federal government can do to help support it. So for example, businesses that use vehicles for delivery, for work, getting to work, whatever, can we bring in subsidies to support the use of zero emission vehicles? So much progress has been made on ZEVs. So they are really amazing, particularly if you're in an urban area. Can we help with can we put the infrastructure in? So there's the charging systems are in place. There is the possibility of looking at heating systems. I don't know how many of you bought a heat pump, but they're almost free if you're lower income families. But can we bring in support industries for bringing heat pumps into their businesses as well? And so they're not only reducing emissions, but saving money as well. These are all done through federal programs. So the federal government can bring in regulations that say this is the work you have to do or the standards you have to meet, but they can also bring in programs that provide the subsidies and the incentives for you to change. So for example, the heat pump right now focuses mostly on households, but right now, if you are using a fossil fuel right now and your income is at a certain level because it's income tested, you can get up to $16,000 towards your heat pump so that you can change your entire heating system. That's a partnership program that we set up with the provincial government. So it's half federal funding, half provincial funding, and it is catching on like wildfire as people are putting these amazing heat pumps into their house. So that's an example of the sort of programs that we need that small businesses can also apply to. So it's not just households, and that would be really amazing. I think the other thing is it's about the supply chain. It's not just about the brick and mortar store and the emissions that are coming from there. It's about the supply chain and the products that are being used by small businesses. And so that requires things like green steel, green aluminum, green cement, like what are all the different things that are happening. That's the sort of happening at a higher scale, but you'll see there's many, many programs to try and incentivize that behavior as well. Thank you.
This is a big issue here, and I think that to me the best method for dealing with that was the carbon tax. I know a lot of people out there hated it, but it actually, you could gradually raise it. It didn't tell you had to sell your car or get an electric car. You could just gradually, you're paying for the pollution. And that was the best, and it was relatively simple. The problem now, I mean, we've got people on minimum wage paying income tax. They can't even pay their rent, and they're paying income tax and GST. The carbon tax, you got somebody that's burning like 500 tons per, in a year, and they're not paying the tax, the negative, tax the bad stuff, carbon emissions. Income is a good thing. A lot of the people that have to pay GST on is something they need. They got to pay GST on it. Tax the pollution. We got used to that, we no longer are allowed to put our sewage into the ditch, right, and run it into the river. Let's get used to the idea that we can't just use the atmosphere as a sewer for our emissions. Let's get it straight. No, we're up 50%. 50% above what it was pre-fossil fuel use in the atmosphere. And don't get the idea that it's because there's not enough vegans. The cows have always been there eating it and shitting and farting, okay? You're not going to solve it by becoming vegan if you're flying around the world 10 times a year. The carbon rise is due to fossil fuel use. It's coming out of the ground. Originally, the planet had very little free oxygen. It was all tied up with carbon. It was carbon dioxide. If we burn all the fossil fuels, we're going to be back to buying your oxygen at the corner store.
So, Tennille put a great pin in it. We are asking businesses to do certain things, and they need to have the support to be able to do it. Who's getting the support right now? It's the fossil fuel industries. We spend billions subsidizing them, and they're mostly owned by American companies. So we're helping American companies with our government money, and we're not helping our own small businesses, our medium-sized enterprises here. And that's not fair, and it's not sustainable for Canada. So we would stop subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, and we would establish a $1 billion federally funded green venture capital fund to support local green startups. We would subsidize clean technology adoption for small and medium enterprises with a $500 million per year investment to accelerate business-led climate solutions. And we would expand entrepreneurship and training and support for equity-seeking groups, including Indigenous, Black, and women-led businesses, with a $250 million annual grant program. All of that money could come from what we are currently spending on subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, which, see my previous argument above, is killing us, and it's destroying our economies, and it's not sustainable for us. And if we can get out of this cycle of destruction and get into a healthy cycle, we have sunlight and wind and water to spare in this country, and we have enough of it to power the whole country. We want to switch to clean energy by 2030 across the grid, across the country, and we can do that. And we can just stop paying the American oil companies and use that money instead. Thank you.
All right, there's two questions that have been vying back and forth for for top rating, and so I'm just going to look and see which one is currently on the top. I'm also going to use a little artistic license when I'm asking this question. Considering Vancouver Island has a long history of resource extraction, or is based on a resource-based economy, how will the candidates preserve, that's not working either. What will the candidates do to recognize a reduced resource economy and promote the sustainable use of our natural resources? And that could be from fishery to forestry to mining. The question is yours to do with it as you will.
Why, thank you. That was interesting because it was assuming a reduction, so that was fascinating. So we are dependent on, we are a resource-based economy. That is how our economy is structured. And if you take one of them out, it will have a massive impact on our communities. So this is something that has to be taken very seriously. I've also worked my entire professional life before I went to work for government as an environmentalist. So I also have fought hard to protect the health of the ocean and to stop climate change. This is a tension that we have in this riding that exists between trying to protect what we have in terms of the natural world and keep these businesses going. And just, my kids are commercial fishermen, so I am definitely pro resource extraction. I'm not against resource use at all. But it has to be done in a way that's sustainable. This requires working collaboratively with the resource users. It is about getting away from a polarized fight of either cutting trees or not cutting trees. It's about getting away from a polarized fight of whether you commercial fish or don't commercial fish, and instead making sure that we've got the plans that ensure that we're doing it in a sustainable way. And then it requires value-added work in the riding. How can we get more money for every tree that's cut? How can we get more money for the fish that we catch? How can we set it up so that you can go down to the dock here and buy fish yourself from the dock and the fisherman can get more pay and it doesn't have to go through a middle person? We need to build that economy so that the resources that we do take out of the natural world we are benefiting from them economically here in the riding. And I think we can do that. And some of that started to happen in COVID, actually. There were some very interesting fishermen who were very innovative and set up businesses where they go to the communities and sell their product now. And I think we need to do more of that. We're not going to move to a place, we're never going to get to a place where we stop cutting trees or we stop fishing. And so we need to find a way to ensure that we are doing both, because healthy communities require a healthy ocean, and healthy communities require a healthy forest. And so we have to be able to do both of them together. Thank you.
I don't think I can do that. Was a great answer, Jennifer. I was sitting there thinking, what am I going to say? And she said everything just exactly what I would have said. That was great. And I'm just going to pass this.
We have a few of these things happen to us yesterday too, where we're like, yeah, what she said. Here's the green sign on it. So absolutely. This is a resource extraction-based economy in our riding, and there's no two ways about it. And contrary to popular belief, the Green Party isn't all about just stopping the forestry industry or stopping the fishing industry. What we want to see is healthy and sustainable forestry and healthy and sustainable fishing and healthy and sustainable mining. We want to make sure that we are consulting with First Nations whose land we're using and make sure that that consultation is actually more than just a box checking exercise, and we are reaching out to the folks whose resources these are and making sure we're on the same page. We want to not only acknowledge that these industries need to be sustainable and healthy going forward, but we can expand them. We can get more for our riding out of these. There's no need to take raw logs and ship them somewhere else to be processed and then buy them back at a higher price. Why don't we just mill them here? Why are we doing this rip and ship economy where we just give the value to another country to add and then we pay the price? We should be adding the value in Canada in this riding. We've got mills we could reopen. We've got mills we could build. and we can make sure that we are expanding these industries and giving breadth so that people are not so afraid that their jobs are going to be lost. And if there is an industry, for example, the salmon farms, where we have to get them out of the water, and those jobs will have to transition to something else, we will support transitioning those workers. They will not be left behind. They will not be high and dry. We will provide well-paid training to them to help them achieve a just transition into a more sustainable industry that will not harm our beautiful island that we all love so much. So we aren't saying no resource extraction. We are saying let's be smart about it. And when we cut down those trees, let's plant forests that are not the same one tree over and over again, and there's no wildfire resiliency. We need to make sure we're planting the forests again with multiple species so that we can maintain these amazing ecosystems that are resilient to disease and fire.
So something that I find myself offering folks when I'm having conversations and about everything across the board is that there's a lot of things that we agree upon that we need in community. For me, it's the how we go about doing that is the difference between us. That really makes or breaks the difference of that economy, of our environment. And so I definitely view, and I agree, the reduction in jobs and in our resource economy is interesting because there are so many amazing opportunities ahead of us that are going to expand job opportunities and in some potentially very, very cool ways. And this is where I go on like my kelp rant. So kelp, seaweed, is a brand new industry, arguably, in our neck of the woods. North Island College here in the Comox Valley successfully attained, I think it's $1.6 million to do research and innovation in the area of kelp. And so they're growing little tiny kelp babies on the land right now at NIC. And kelp is such an amazing industry that could be combined with on-the-land fish farms, because fish farms create waste, and that waste is actually extremely useful. You can use that waste in your gardens, and where I would love to see it used is growing kelp and growing kelp side by side on the land. That kelp can be sold to make clothes. You can make reusable bags from it. You can put it back in the ocean where we've destroyed kelp beds, grow new kelp beds that become habitats that then cool the ocean's temperature. Really, really amazing stuff can happen with kelp and seaweed, which is really exciting. So that's a whole industry that we haven't tapped into, but we're researching in it right now, and it's really, really neat stuff. The other big piece is we need to become champions in not only production spaces, but manufacturing spaces. Everyone wants to see our logs stay home. People don't want to see our logs going into the United States, for example. We want to keep our logs here. We want to build with our own materials. So if we can flip it around and start not only producing or extracting in Canada, but manufacturing the goods from those extractions. That's where we're really going to be able to stand up as a country, own our own, and become super stable across our economies. And so I would love, love, love to see us invest in ourselves.
So this question is really popular. This next one is really popular, but I'm not sure you're going to need the whole 2.5 minutes or 2 minutes. How will you support funding for the CBC?
Oh, TBC, okay.
You already answered the other one.
Yeah, no, I was looking at the second one. I thought, okay.
No. They pop up here. They just
How
surprise
will
you.
you support? I'm a big fan of the CBC. I mean, anybody remember Peter Zosky? You know, like that. I started listening to it because I had a radio in my car, and I hated advertising. Every time an ad would come on, I'd switch stations. When I got on CBC, there were no ads, so I never switched. And I gradually got used to the really boring stuff they were talking about. But CBC, I don't know, sometimes it's a bit too, can I say the word woke? You know, it's a little too far out there sometimes, a little too biased, but it's still worthwhile. I would support funding for CBC, yeah. Just on that last one, if I could backtrack a little bit, I know I agreed with Jennifer, but when you start talking about tree planting and, growing the kelp, nature does that. My lot that I have is covered with trees. Nobody planted them. It was logged before, and we don't really have to plant them. They'll grow. So, that's, I just wanted to add that to, anyway, CBC, there you go.
So we absolutely need to support the CBC and Radio Canada. CBC is the only broadcaster that has programs in English and French, and also 8 Indigenous languages. It represents communities across the country, and we get truly Canadian programming that is just part of our culture. It's we all grew up with it, and we cannot let it slip aside for private and American industries to come in and fill that space. So we are calling for the restoration of the Canada Council for the Arts fund to return to its 2021 level of $500 million in funding, which would allow journalists and other broadcasters to feel more secure in their jobs. And we, as consumers of the media, can know that we are getting great Canadian content and supporting those artists and those journalists with the work that they're doing.
This is where I say I agree with Jessica. I definitely support the CBC. I think there's some folks that are extremely frustrated with content on CBC, and maybe that's fair. Instead of looking to immediately disable something or defund something, I think we should be looking at review opportunities and feedback opportunities for why people are feeling that maybe the CBC is misrepresenting Canada, BC, or even their rural community, if that's the case. I think getting that feedback and allowing CBC to hear the whys behind the frustration would allow them to either adjust their content or have more specific content on specific pieces of information, topics that can have more dialogue on maybe topics that people are listening for and they want to hear from CBC, but that they're not hearing. So instead of looking to just immediately defund something because perhaps you're frustrated with it or you don't feel like it represents you, we need to engage in that opportunity and diversify CBC. And maybe we need some different types of content on there to help reach the broader group of Canadians that support CBC for what it is.
I'm a huge fan of the CBC, and I would say one of my family's fondest memories was when we'd be up at our cabin at Mount Cain, and I would get up early in the morning and turn on the CBC and have my coffee, and the kids would lie in bed and just listen to it, and they would learn so much of the country just lying in bed listening to the stories on Saturday and Sunday morning. So it's something that shapes our lives. So I was super proud when Mark Carney came out and announced his commitment to not only maintaining CBC, but making it even better. And I just want to focus on 3 things that he said he would do. So one is more reporters, more coverage in small communities. Our stories are not being told. It's great that we have Victoria, but there were so many great stories in every community in this riding and across the island and across the country, and we need to follow that. We don't get that from a lot of other news services, so super thrilled about that. He wants to look at reviewing the mandate of the CBC. As Neil says, like, what's working, what's not working. Let's look at that and make sure it's got a bit of a facelift and it's working for Canadians. And then the third thing, which I also really liked, is just what are more options for accessibility and things like I don't know about you guys. I am addicted to podcasts, and being able to listen to all my favorite CBC shows. Now you can go and listen to them on podcast when you want, at the time you want. It's pretty amazing, right? So as the digital world changes, how does the CBC change with it so it's keeping up with the times? So those are at least 3 of the things he's committed to, and I think it's super exciting and really great that we're going to not only keep the CBC, but have an improved CBC going forward. Thanks.
All right, we're going to get maybe a little bit closer back to business, and you're going to have to bear with me for a second. This is obviously a multi-jurisdictional issue, but one that affects business owners and their employees, as everybody needs a place to live. How do you plan to deal with the real housing crisis which the Comox Valley is in, and a rental affordability crisis? How do you deal with housing, basically?
This is one that I think you'll hear a lot of us saying a lot of the same things. We need to make sure that the government gets back into the business of building homes for people. We haven't had a major government supported project like this since the 1970s. We can use Canadian lumber, we can use Canadian labor, we can make a lot of homes for people if we have the government support behind it. So we need to have a program that will build units for people. The other part of this is affordability. Affordability doesn't mean what the market rate is going at, because I'm sure all of you in here know, I know, the market in Comox is crazy, and it's like this up the whole North Island in Powell River. It's not just us. It's unattainable for a lot of people, for most people. And we need to ask ourselves, why are rents so high? Why are mortgages so high? Part of that is because corporations come in and they buy up houses and they treat them like stocks that they can trade, and it artificially inflates the price of the homes, and we're stuck with affordable, meaning 80% of that fake inflated market rate. Affordable means what can you afford? It should be indexed to your income, and we would call for all of the homes that we're building to be indexed to income, so that affordable is, and no one person or family is paying more than 30% of their income for a home that they can live in. And these homes need to be accessible. We need to make sure that they're sustainable, and we can use government support to make sure that they are as green as possible and they're up to the highest standards, because that's how it's going to be going forward. Also, our tax plan that I mentioned earlier is going to put a lot of money available to people so that they can actually afford their rents. But we need to make sure that affordable means affordable for you, affordable for your neighbors, and not affordable for the market rates that are artificially inflated.
Yeah, so you will hear all parties commit to building, absolutely building using Canadian logs and Canadian builders to do that work. So one thing I would like to highlight is that when we're building, it can't just be pre-drawn up plans for your average old apartment building or your average old townhouse. We need to make sure that when we're building these homes, that they're accessible for people of all differing abilities. We need to make sure that when we're building homes, that they're accessible for seniors and that they're going to support that senior to live a long time in place and be able to stay home. We need to build homes that are accessible for people that live with differing abilities, to make sure that they can live in that home and they're not going to have to displace themselves again in a year or two because their abilities change or differ. We need to make sure that we're housing for all of Canadians and not just people that are able-bodied to be able to have a home over their head. One thing that we've committed to is rental caps. So making sure that big corporations aren't coming and buying up old apartment buildings or buying up townhouses and then jacking up the rent sky high and making huge profits. So ensuring that we can maintain decent renting levels so that people have a chance to live and thrive in whatever that rental situation looks like for them, whether it's a house or a townhouse or apartment building. I'm excited to see the federal government invest in housing. This is where we need to get back to. We once did have a federal housing plan. We once did build federal housing, and we had a quota that we had to meet every year to make sure we would not land ourselves in a housing crisis. Lo and behold, we let go of that plan. We said, nah, don't need it. And now here we are. Here we are attempting to redo something that we were already doing well, but we let go of it. as a federal government. So I'm excited to see that come forward again. I want to make sure that what's being built is accessible across the board for all people of differing abilities, and not just people that are able-bodied and well-to-do for themselves.
So Mark Carney has announced a housing plan that will get to the point where it's going to be building 500,000 homes per year. The federal government will be back in the business of building homes, and they will be starter homes. So instead of the large expensive homes that I know my kids can't afford, I don't even think I can ever afford, we are looking at smaller starter homes so that people can get their foot in the door with real estate, which I think is great. And if I was elected, I would have a seat at the table at that government as that program's developed. So I could ensure that it was accessible homes. I could ensure that it was the right kind of homes, that they were designed in the right way. And I think that's really important, and I could help advocate for that. I think one of the other things that's really important is that these homes that they want to build are low emission and resilient for the changing climate that's coming. So they're trying to build for the future, not just for today, which is fantastic. But they're not just about the federal government building. They also want to partner with not-for-profit organizations like Habitat for Humanity, which I got to meet with here, and it's just an amazing organization, really trying to help people get their foot in the door into the housing market. And so, how can the federal government, through this program, partner with these really great organizations that are already on the ground, have land available to build on, right? So I think we're really looking forward to making that happen, because there are some sites in this riding where they could build, which would be super exciting. So I'd love to be able to help facilitate that relationship and make that happen. And then finally, it's not just about the government building, it's also about helping the private developers. And one of the things that we want to do is, so there's very high costs that a developer has to pay to the municipalities, because the municipalities need the money to build the infrastructure. So what the federal government wants to do is cut those fees in half, so the developer doesn't have to pay as much, so it's not as much of a barrier, and they can pass on less to the consumer, but then help invest in the infrastructure in the municipality. So it's a win-win situation there, and it helps build more homes. So it's not just us, it's also builders as well. But it's a great comprehensive plan, and then attached to that is also a trades program. So we need to train up the people and create the jobs that will then help build the house. So really connecting the dots between what people need, what municipality needs, and then what our youth need in order to get the great jobs that they can get in our country. Thanks.
Yeah, on this one, I'm sorry, I can't just agree with everything that's been said. I think the government being responsible for housing is not really all these trying to fund this and fund that. You're building bureaucracies, and the end up is the houses get more expensive in the end. Now, there's a lot of factors in the house prices. There's the speculators, there's the zoning, which, by the way, is local, not Government of Canada. Provincial and municipal have more to do with housing than the federal government does. But there's also a shortage of skilled labor. Now, I grew up in a house, a small house that had 12 people in it. My mom had 8 kids. No running water, no plumbing. Running water was when you ran from the well with pails. But the thing is, my father was a carpenter, and we were building things. So I'm out there when I'm 5 years old, 6 years old, helping where I can. By the time I was 13, I could drive a nail in with one blow. And I built houses. I built them. I know how it works. It's over-regulated. There's a whole bunch of things that can be done, but turning it all over to the federal government is not going to be the way to do it, to start all of these programs. You need to get more, for one thing, you need to get more skilled labor by getting more people. Right now, if you don't have money, you reach out your hand and the government's supposed to fill it with cash. When I was growing up, there was I didn't know anybody on welfare. If you didn't have money, you went to look for work. On a construction site maybe, hey? But if you couldn't find any jobs that were paying hourly wage, then you'd start some business. You'd figure out how to make a little bit of money. start a business. And that's what's really missing now. My son that works in that, they have a constant problem with getting the labor to actually do the work. And I guess I could promise to build another house, you know.
Okay, I've got 2 questions that I'd like to ask. So we're going to go through 2 more rounds and then make final statements. And hopefully we'll be right about on time. Of course, these are such easy questions too. This one kind of intrigues me, and I see a couple versions of it, so I'm going to ask you both versions. Can you speak to nation-to-nation relationship and communication with the 10 First Nations in our riding? We have many Indigenous-owned businesses in our riding. Can you speak about how you will support reconciliation and respecting their lived experience?
We have 22 First Nations in our riding.
I did not fact check that, so.
And it depends on how you chop it up, because most people don't know that like Cayuquit-Checkilsit is actually 2 nations. It's Cayuquit and it's Checkilsit. Mawachat-Muchalat is Mawachat and Muchalat, and anyways, on and on and on. So there are many First Nations in our riding, and I view that as a total asset. I think our nations are among the most resilient people you've ever met in your life, and in such a time where we're facing these crazy tariffs and the threats of annexation from Trump, I think we have no better strength than to partner with our nations and thrive through this time. Nations have fabulous ideas for investing in our riding, but they need to be given a seat at the table. They need to be welcomed to have those conversations and to be meaningful participants in those conversations with all levels of government. I'm a huge collaborator, and I really get frustrated when I see levels of government blaming other levels of government for things, or just passing the buck of responsibility from federal to provincial to municipal, and then maybe over to the nation to say, no, actually you fix it, or you do it, or here's some money. That doesn't work. We need to come together as all levels of government, work across difference, and find solutions that everyone can be accountable to. And our nations are ready, willing, and interested to do that work. They're so excited to do that work. I met with a nation earlier today to talk about just that, because they are highly committed in the logging industry, and they potentially want to look at what their next step is in logging, because they know that all of our parties are committing to build. And they're here saying, how do we help? How do we help? How do we become a meaningful part of this? Well, we need to give them a seat at the table so that they can come and have those conversations. And I'm not talking just our treaty nations. We shouldn't have to have nations sign on to a governmental agreement to welcome them to the table as the governments that they already sit as. We need to honor them in the place that they're sitting now and the value add that they are, and do that work together.
So one of the examples I really like to look at, it is outside the riding, but I find it's just a really interesting project, is the Cedar LNG up in Kitimat. So here's a nation that worked with industry to create a partnership so that the nation is, I think, the majority owner, but the money, so this is for an LNG terminal, the money stays in community. This is a very different from other projects where the money, industry comes into a community, destroys the area, and leaves with the money. So this is a project where the money stays in community, and the project is also, and the nations have committed to be net zero by 2030. So it's a really amazing example of how when we sit down and work with nations, we can help them, but we can benefit from their knowledge and their commitment, and it also helps them deal with some of the issues in their community by bringing more money for them, which is, I think, a really, really excellent model for us to work through. I think one of the things that's also really important is how the story is told. And I mean, we've seen some of this with the Conservative candidate who's not here tonight, but we really need to make sure we're telling the story of our history in a way that's honest and transparent. It's not one side or the other. It's a complex narrative, our country, and we need to be able to tell all of it so that we understand how things are, and we can make sure things don't happen again that are bad. And I really think how the story is told is important. And I know that I was very honored to work on some work with Parks Canada, where they really initiated some projects of telling the story accurately of things that were in the national park with Indigenous nations. And it was groundbreaking. It was amazing. And it changed the way people learned when they showed up there. And then finally, I think it's really important that it's not just big industries. There's a lot of small Indigenous entrepreneurs. And so how can we make sure we're providing the support for them so that they can build small businesses that can be an important part of our economy? Thank you very much.
That's kind of a touchy issue here. Listen, I worked and lived in 3 different Indigenous communities, and what I found, I learned so much, especially my first job in Nemai Valley. The kids, when it was a brand new school on the reserve. The year before they'd gone out to residential school, so it's a brand new school. The kids, when they would arrive at school, couldn't speak English, so I had to learn a little bit of Chilcotin. But I'll tell you, I learned way more than my students did. It was just such an interesting. But one of the things I learned through the years was that the destruction of the apartheid system that Canada had was terrible. It was just outrageous what happened to the original inhabitants here. You know, they were the original inhabitants. So what do? We come in, take the land, and lock them up on reservations. These were the people that were here. It's so unfair, so bad. And it ended up causing all kinds of social issues, destruction. But I'll tell you something I learned. I had a kid in grade 2. No, he was in grade 4. He'd only been in school 2 years up in Fort Resolution, because the first 2 years he was out on the trap line, okay? On the trap line. So he would sit there and I would teach them and he would argue with me, fold up his arms. And I loved it, because to me, that's how you learn. You know, he could think. This kid ended up on the Smartest Man in Canada show. Okay, you think about it. You're out in a trap line. All the obedience that we teach in our culture is not going to do you any good. You'll be dead by the morning. You got to think all day long or you're going to be dead. And that's what this kid learned to do. And I believe, honestly, it may sound racist, but I believe that the Indigenous people are on average more intelligent than the rest of us.
It's so important that we recognize that we are not, most of you, I'm going to take a wild guess, are settler background like myself. And it's really important that we recognize that we are guests on this land. It has never been ceded in any place in this riding. And we are here as guests, and we need to work with these other governments like the governments they are. And like Tennille said, in the state that they are, where they're at, not only the treaty nations, but those that are, just independent and they're other nations by themselves. So the Green Party fully recognizes the importance of UNDRIP and fully recognizes the importance of following through with our commitment on the truth and reconciliation work that needs to be done. There's clearly still racism in this riding against Indigenous people, against the First Nation people. So we're at the very basic starting point of how do we grow? Well, we look inside ourselves and we reflect and we listen to those around us, and we listen to the First Nations and the wisdom that they have to share, because they have been here since time immemorial. Another thing to think about that I'm really proud of is Elizabeth May has passed more private members' bills than the leader of the party of the person who is absent. And one of those bills was about environmental racism and knowing that Indigenous communities, underserved communities, poor communities are the ones most likely to be affected by big projects. And they're the ones who get pipelines drilled through their earth. They're the ones who are really feeling the effects of it. So it's a bill that requires that we look at how is this affecting those underserved and Indigenous communities, and we need to make sure that we have the support and investment from the federal government to be able to make sure that that's not happening.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's unfortunate. I think I had one more question, but we're in the interest of time. We're not going to get to anything more. It was on AI, if you want to speak to it. Our time is quickly drawing to an end, and so now I'd like to welcome the candidates to make their final closing remarks. And Jennifer, if you could kick us off, please.
So this election is different from previous elections. Donald Trump and the global trade war, combined with fear of a conservative government, fear of a conservative government that will take us in the same direction, is causing a lot of angst in this community and throughout the riding. I've heard this at the door, I've heard it on the phone, I've heard it at every meeting I've been to. There's three things that I ask you to consider when you're making your decision of who to vote for. So number one is that Mark Carney and the Liberal Party are poised to win the election and possibly form a majority. Carney has a big vision, and it includes reconciliation, building the economy, and protecting the world around us. You deserve to have a representative who's a part of the team that's turning that vision into reality. Number two, support for the NDP is collapsing nationally, and they're on track to lose official party status. This means they'll have less funding and less influence than ever before. Unlike in 2019 and 2021, it's extremely unlikely that the NDP will hold any balance of power, drastically diminishing any ability to influence federal policies. And thirdly, don't let anyone take your vote for granted. Just because you voted one way for many years, as I did, does not mean you have to vote that way again. You do not have to vote out of fear. You are allowed to vote for hope, vision, and a seat at the table. We live in an amazing riding, but this riding can get lost in the shuffle as central Canada and urban ridings try and dominate the agenda. That will not happen under my watch. I have organized campaigns that have resulted in the creation of Canada's first most effective climate plan. I've organized coastwide to maintain the moratorium on offshore oil and gas. And when I wanted to protect the deep sea corals, I learned to drive a submarine and went and explored the seabed. If you want to ensure that we do not elect a MP who has certain views that are harmful, that we do elect Mark Carney as the Prime Minister, and we have a member who has a seat at the table and is best able to serve this riding, I think you should vote for me. Thank you.
Can't wait to hear Tennille's response to that one.
Thanks, Glenn.
A couple of things. One, I didn't really get a chance to talk enough about how much I like free enterprise. Just get out there and I talked about it a little bit, but that is, there's too much government handouts, too much government giving money away to everybody that wants it. These programs, promises, elections now are like sales campaigns. I'm going to promise you this. I'm going to promise you to cut taxes. I'm going to promise to give you money for this. It's like buying your vote. They should be looking after the long-term interest. But the thing I really wanted to get to was I'm an independent because I've come to the conclusion that a lot of the problems are from the party structures. The original Parliament of Canada was 100% independence. That they decided who was going to be Prime Minister. The Prime Minister answered to the MPs, not the other way around. And parties formed, just like kids in a schoolyard. They go to opposite sides. And then eventually, nowadays, you can't even run as a candidate unless your party leader signs your nomination. That's why she's talking about Mark Carney instead of herself, you see. You're going to vote for Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre. The local candidate they have to do what they're told. So that's not the best way to have it. The best way is to have, and I know we're a long ways, I know we're probably not going to elect an independent, but maybe somebody out there will run as an independent next time and actually campaign and win. You could actually, if you were an independent, you could vote for what you think is best, not what your party tells you to vote for because they think it'll help them win the next election. We need to have people that are looking at the long term, not just how to win the election, not how to buy your vote. And that's what the party structure, basically, somebody mentioned dictator here earlier, and basically you've got a choice between two dictators. Okay, that's what, I mean, they may be very nice dictators, but you're gonna have either Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre, and they're gonna decide everything underneath them. It wasn't designed that way.
I'd like to close by thanking everyone again for coming out. We've got a beautiful night and we're inside in this very warm room with apparently a meat auction below us. So thank you very much for coming out. I know that Comox in particular is divided and there is a lot of fear in our community. There's a lot of anxiety about what's going to happen. And I want to just say that I recognize that we all want what's best for our community, and we have different ideas of what is best for our community, but we all want the same thing, which is a vibrant, beautiful, safe, secure place where we can afford to live and where we can enjoy this amazing island that we all choose to live here because of how special it is. And I don't want us to let the division and the anger and the anxiety keep us from looking out for each other. Because if there is one way through what we are experiencing right now, it is our communities. It is still saying hello and smiling at our neighbors, even if they have a different colored lawn sign on their front lawn than you do. It's looking out for them. It's checking in on them. And it is by supporting our communities that we can make it through this. And everyone's vote matters. Every single vote matters. Your vote is not more important than the vote of the person sitting next to you. If they have a different voice, if they want to support a different party, that's their democratic right. And if we are going to hold up the Canadian democracy as something different, as something special, as something to be protected, we need to understand that means recognizing different voices. And I am not saying that I condone those voices that are racist and angry and hurtful and want to take rights away from people. But we just can't let this fracture us as a community. And you can vote green because it is what you value the most, because you know that saving the world, the climate that we're in, the environment, is the most important thing, and it is the lens that we look at everything through. So don't be afraid to vote how your heart wants you to vote. It's how democracy works. Thank you.
So I just want to offer a couple things, and some of those things are that I question Mark Carney's commitment to reconciliation. One, there was supposed to be a promise that we would all have drinkable water out of our faucet by 2021, and we don't have that. We have nations that live in third world country means right now, and that's horrid. Mark Carney arrived in the Wasanich Nations and not only did not invite any of their leadership to join him, he didn't even acknowledge the territory that he showed up on when he went to do it. It's been offered that our Liberal candidate has been a champion in the climate space, which is challenging for me to comprehend because now you're running with a party that is committed to big oil across the country with the east-west pipeline connector. If we wouldn't be in this situation of asking you to strategic vote if the Liberal Party had kept their commitment of proportional representation. We wouldn't be here. We're also in BC. The NDP is not going anywhere. We are not losing official party status. We're not going to be defunded and not exist. We're in British Columbia, and we are the federal conscience. We're the social conscience of the federal government, and we need that. We do our best work with minority governments, and we've seen that year over year. That's why we have pharmacare, which Mark Carney has alluded to not wanting to expand already. That's why we have $10 a day childcare, which is just a total asset to so many families, and so many tiny humans are getting an amazing social experience because of that $10 a day childcare being accessible to their family. And dental care. I mean, that's something that nationwide we're thrilled about and is absolutely amazing, and all with minority governments, with that social conscience, just digging away, being like, we got to do the right thing. We got to do the right thing. So I want to offer again, like, my strength is in finding and implementing solutions across diverse and complex situations. I want to do that work for you. I want to do that work for us in Ottawa. I want to make sure that North Island Powell River is well represented, and the entirety of North Island Powell River, not just our urban centers. So I look forward to hopefully your support at the polls. And conveniently enough, if the NDP can take this riding, we actually support Mark Carney in his goal of Prime Minister, because we keep out the Conservatives, and that's what I know we all really, really want to do. So thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the evening, and please, once again, join me in showing our appreciation to our candidates and wish them all the best of luck. I would also like to give a thanks to the Comox Legion for allowing us to use their space tonight. The spaces in the valley are at a premium, so we appreciate them accommodating us.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Tracy, our executive director, and Carrie Ann for putting on this amazing event tonight. And I'd like to thank you, because you, as an audience, were respectful and played the game, and I really appreciate it, because I was worried. And I shouldn't have been, because the Comox Valley is an amazing place, so thank you for that. I know I don't have to say it to an engaged political audience now, but get out and vote. If you need the details, there's Elections Canada website to get it on. You can vote early, or you can vote on time. Just vote.
Take my friends.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming. Thank you.